David, great to have you on the podcast here today. How are you?
Good, Jared. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Excited to have you. Let's really kick things off. Tell the audience a little bit about yourself, and then we'll talk about NextRivet. And then I have a bunch of stuff I want to chat with you about today, so I'm excited.
Yeah, sure. Likewise. David Blumenfeld. I'm the co-founder of NextRivet. We are a San Francisco-based PropTech consulting firm focused on kind of bringing digital innovation into the physical environment, specifically for real estate, whether that be retail real estate like shopping centers, commercial real estate, office buildings, as well as mixed-use family. But our focus is really around how do you take a lot of strategy and when a lot of people have a lot of great ideas as to what they want to do, but don't necessarily have the expertise in house or the resources to get projects launched and live. And so our sweet spot is really taking. We can help build the ideas if you need us to, but I think more importantly, we actually take it from that fancy PowerPoint slide and actually put it into action and get things live and moving. So we felt like that's been the biggest challenge for a lot of our clients is kind of moving from that ideation to execution phase, and that's the bridge that we're trying to fill or support.
Let's talk a little bit about how prop tech has evolved in recent years because it's evolved a lot through your lens. Let's hear that.
So I mean it's I think dramatically over the last 10, 15 years. So I've been in technology my entire career, but I really got into the real estate world back about 15 years ago. I was on the founding executive team at Westfield Labs, which was a digital division of Westfield Malls. Westfield had shopping centers in the US, the UK, as well as Australia. And we were tasked with really at the time where, e-commerce had really started to grow. Amazon was really making inroads. The percentage of overall sales for online sales as a percentage of overall sales had started to reach double digits. And, the shopping centers were sitting there going, okay, before this just overwhelms us, how do we stay relevant, especially to a younger audience who's coming in expecting some type of digital interface to their physical shopping experience? And so we were kind of tasked with coming in and essentially, for lack of a better term, how do we keep them all relevant from a digital perspective? And so we tried a lot of different things, both from a consumer facing perspective, whether those be, table stakes, websites, apps, food pre-order and delivery from the food courts, light express parking, where we were doing license plate recognition. So somebody could actually tie their credit card to their license plate. And when you drove up to that boom gate, we'd automatically recognize who you are and open it. And when you left, we'd close it and charge your credit card. Indoor navigation, whether that be on digital screens to on taking it on your mobile device with you. And so there's many, many examples of a lot of different things we had the opportunity to try. And then certainly there were some things that were on the back end that were just starting to happen, whether like getting smarter about your building systems, but that was pretty nascent at that time. I think where you've seen a lot of evolution and certainly, you can everybody's talking about AI these days and certainly where AI has come in is some of that's been accelerated. So especially, I mean, certainly on the consumer facing side, you have different experiences, whether it's, augmented reality or virtual reality or some of these things that are starting to play in or better understanding traffic patterns that are happening in a particular building. And that does have to be just be a mall, but also a commercial or office space, not just the number of people coming in, but actually where they're going and how long they're spending and all that things that come with video analytics versus kind of old school kind of door counters. And then I think where it's really started to get interesting is even in the design construction space, combined with the build process, and then actually once the building's up and live, building management systems, kind of what is the health of the heartbeat of your building at any given time, and how do you optimize that automatically versus somebody having to pull levers? So I always kind of equate it back to just as many of us have maybe the Google Nest thermostat for your house. Think about that, but on steroids for your building, right? Where you start to be able to optimize your HVAC systems, you start to be able to optimize lighting and other energy usages in a more efficient way. So you're actually proactively saving money and using the building more efficiently without somebody having to have their hand on the lever, their foot on the foot on the pedal, so to speak.
Yeah, honestly, I personally thought we've made a lot of progress as an industry in it heading that way. I thought we would be a little further along in certain areas, and I don't think it's because of the innovation. I think it's still because of, people getting set in their old ways, like,
Yeah.
especially, like, after the pandemic where people are tend to be traveling a little bit more, have adopted more of a remote lifestyle, right, where they might go away for someplace for several weeks. The fact that you can't for many people, you can't just hop on your phone and check that water temperature, like everything. Yeah, I know you can for some things, but the
Mhm.
fact that you can't get a full snapshot of your place to know that it's safe for you to leave it for weeks at a time is still kind of crazy to me. And I know there's circumstances where that's the case where you can. I've had a lot of conversations with people like, how do we get people out of their old ways? Because I'm even seeing it with like these property management companies. Things have changed. AI has changed the game. Why do they still have like you'll have buildings, sorry, I'm just going on a rant right now, and then I'll
No,
get
go
with
for
this
it.
thing.
Yeah.
But you have like buildings I see that are like, what's the occupancy? And they're like 90, 95%. And then they have 3 salespeople. Like to me, that's just mind boggling that I know we don't want to talk about it, but AI means for certain things, less people, like more
Yeah.
automation, less people.
Yeah.
So that's a long way of saying, how do we get people to get out of their own way, which is a whole human psychology deal, but would love to hear your thoughts on, like, how do we start making even more progress because the technology is there?
Well, I mean, first of all, let's just acknowledge we're in the real estate space, right? And nothing moves very quickly in the real estate space. It's an industry that's based on predictable returns, low risk, you name it, kind of all flies in the face of technology and innovation in a lot of ways. And that was something we learned again when we were back at Westfield and we were literally asking for budgets from people who didn't understand what the heck we were asking for budget for. And so you have this just there's a lack of education in the space. And I think when you start to then get into things that, it's kind of like people start to it creates kind of a frenzy which AI I think has around technology. I think for a long time, they were able a lot of real estate owners were able to kind of, bare bones, I'll just let IT handle that. It'll be fine. We just need maybe some Wi-Fi in our buildings and, a few other things. Now it's kind of becoming table stakes. And so I think though that the problem is because you have this kind of conservative point of view, there is a little bit of like ostrich stick your head in the sand. And I was kind of joking, in most industries and anytime you're trying something new, everybody wants to be the first to be second. Meaning I want to be on the cutting edge, but I don't want to be the very first person so that somebody who has at least tried it. So if I have to justify it to my boss, I at least have one case study that I can go to and say, "Hey, look, they've done this." Now, in the real estate space, everybody wants to be the first to be 15th or 20th. So we are a copycat industry. And that goes from physical structures to everything digital too. And so it is it people wanna hear about other people doing it before they make that leap, and I think that's been a big problem as you addressed in terms of some of that change, and especially something new like AI comes along, I think people hear AI, they hear cloud, and they don't necessarily get what that means. I had a funny conversation with my mom a couple weeks ago. Sorry, mom, if you're listening to this, I'm gonna throw you under the bus, but she was like, so I don't get the cloud because I have stuff in my iCloud, and so, like, Apple it turns out Apple had done such a good job of branding iCloud, she thought it was all going to Apple. And so, I think there's probably similar stories like that out there, but I think with we've had a client in the real estate space who they told us their legal team just kinda put the foot down and said, "Nobody's using AI for anything because I don't want any of our information out on the broader web." And that was all the way down to the marketing team not being able to use ChatGPT for maybe rewriting a marketing slogan. And so I think there's this kind of this fear and lack of understanding just in terms of what all of it means, and because we're a conservative industry, some people have just shut it down entirely, and that's not to say everybody's doing that, but there are, I think, a lot of examples of just that. I'm going to hold off as long as I need to until I have to, and it's one of the things we're trying to do with our clients and executive teams is just, hey, can we help? Not can we help? Just bless you, come in and do help you do the work, but can we help come in and educate you on just like how you think about this, how you can think about this in a way that protects your data, but also starts to help you use some of this technology and actually move your business forward.
And what's so interesting about this space compared to even other industries is if you're a new entrepreneur and you're talking with places and you're hearing their problems, you might think that wow, the opportunity is wide open. No one's create like, unlike a lot of things where you hear about something else they're using, but that does not mean there's not 5, 10 other solutions, right, that are available in the space. It's like what
Right.
you were saying, people are just so stuck in their ways in some cases where it's gonna be more slower moving, which is definitely somewhat unique to this space compared to other spaces where people will say, "No, we've tried this solution," or something. They won't even try sometimes, but I think that is going to start heavily changing where, it's we're getting to a point where people were so fearful of trying new technologies, and I think we're at a pivotal moment where we're starting to switch to, "I want to try new stuff because of how it can impact what I'm doing."
Yeah.
Um, Staying on that topic, what are some of the biggest trends that you're currently seeing shaping the industry? And you can mention AI, but even outside of AI, and I guess what should real estate, professionals keep an eye on?
Well, I mean, in this country, and we have clients in 15 countries around the world, so we get an interesting snapshot of kind of where, the U.S. is compared to Europe, to the Middle East, to Latin America, and it really is, different in every country. But we've done a lot of projects this year, surprisingly, around just table stake. What we thought were table stakes things around automated leasing platforms, right? A lot of leasing teams sitting there with an Excel spreadsheet managing their lead list, and then the second they walk out the door, if they go to another company, they've just taken all the out of that IP with them. Whereas we've worked on a couple companies on a centralized leasing platform that obviously manages all their contact information, but then also manages the leasing process throughout, a full pipeline essentially. And then even adding on, can now once that tenant is signed, can we look at tenant coordination to actually go from lease signing to go live in a property. And then I think the next gen of that stuff where AI gets kind of layered into those types of systems are things around what it kind of is called lease extraction, where now instead of writing a brand new contract every time, can I actually quickly search, hey, this retailer wants a specific clause. Have we ever done that before across anybody else? Can I pull language from another contract easily to pop in there, so the efficiencies start to get really interesting because you're not having to recreate the wheel every single time. And I think this is the important thing when we talk about AI in general. I always kind of laugh when people, I think AI has been so promoted. I think in a lot of people's minds who don't necessarily understand it very well, AI is like a robot, right? It's like a thing. It's an actual like end product. AI is an ingredient brand, right? AI is inside powering all the things we already use. And certainly it has created some new things. But at the end of the day, like AI isn't a standalone thing. It's an ingredient kind of, to call it a turbo boosting technology. I always go back to the old Intel campaigns, if you remember any of those, which was, the Intel Inside, where they would market the fact that their silicon chip was inside a Dell or inside an IBM computer. It's just taken in that, you kinda use that same analogy, it's now AI inside. It's everything's coming with that AI inside, improving those tools, but and I think that's where we can help a lot of executives get their arms around this a little more and a little less scared about all this is, "Hey, guess what? Your email, the email client you're using today, that just got smarter because maybe it organizes your emails more and summarizes them better using a component of AI." So, I think that's a critical point. Sorry, I spent a lot of time on one technology.
No, no, keep yeah, I love it.
I think another interesting thing that we've seen evolve over the last 10 years, especially, is I mentioned this a little bit before, but kind of what we call spatial analytics, not just understanding foot traffic into a property, but where they go, what's the percentage of people who convert from a common area of a property into a physical retail store? Because now you can actually have leasing conversations based on data, right? In the past, it's been, okay, we know that, 5 million people come to the mall, but when you're having a conversation between a landlord and a tenant, like, we don't know exactly how many people have converted into store. The retailer is always kind of hesitant to share detailed sales data with the landlord beyond what they're required to report every month, because they don't want to let on, if they're doing really well, they don't want the landlord to raise the rent. So there's always been this, awkward tension or natural tension between the landlord and the tenant. But I think there's with more data that's now at people's fingertips, there's an opportunity to actually change the conversation and do so from a data perspective. And sometimes that's going to benefit the retailer, and sometimes that's going to benefit the landlord. But you got to figure, at the end of the day, it should it should all come out in the wash, and then you're having conversations based on real numbers, not just estimates and kind of finger in the air, so to speak.
David, I'd love to also get your take on really developing a digital roadmap. So for the real estate owners out there that these are the ones that do want to embrace technology,
Mhm.
what would you say are some of the first practical steps that they should take to create a digital transformation strategy?
Yeah, so we obviously we do this a lot with our clients, and I think the biggest thing is I think starting with try not to boil the ocean. I think it's good to get all your ideas together. I think you have a lot of smart team members. Get ideas from your company as well. You know, sometimes people are a little scared to do that internally because they feel like they're opening up some sort of Pandora's box. But be inclusive in the process. You still have to have a small decision making team, but be inclusive in the process. Get some of those ideas down on paper. You know, I'm not trying to self promote here. Like, I think it's helpful to bring in an outside third party, whether that's us or somebody else, to help you kind of sift through the ideas. Because going back to our labs experience, a lot of the things, there's a, I think where you start to need help is on, okay, what's the thing that's going to move the needle the most? Also, sequencing. A lot of times, if you don't think about the sequencing, especially if something needs to be developed longer term, like, I'll give you an example. Somebody's like, we wanna have a loyalty program, but in fact, they don't have very many digital touch points or interactivity points for the consumer to actually engage with them before they have a loyalty program. So if you have no way for somebody to sign up, or there's no value or value exchange, there's no reason to then launch a program. And so there are things like that where I think the how do you boil things down and into the things that they're going to move the needle the most? How do you prioritize those things? How do you then sequence those things? And then how do you do it in a way where you can get launched and live quickly and test and learn versus, kind of traditional software development, which, like, okay, in a year we're going to have a new system. Like, do things where you can try to get quick wins. And I also say, don't try to boil the ocean with 25, 30 ideas out of the gate. I think I would say we made that mistake at Westfield where we took on too much too soon. And then we were launching all the time. I can't say every single time that launch was an amazing product. And it doesn't have to be amazing product. I think we always kind of joke live is better than perfect. But at the same time, like, have a few things that you can really focus on and test and learn, because if you don't, you'll end up launching a lot of things that you may not give a chance to get to succeed over time. And then you might have killed something that would have worked. On the flip side, you may just be launching a bunch of mediocre stuff that didn't have a chance in the first place. And so I guess I can't stress that enough. Start with a few things, test and learn, dip your toe in the water. You can always do more over time, but trying to create a 5-year plan when you've never done anything before, is just kind of a recipe for overthinking it and spending too much money and really not getting live anytime soon.
Last question for you, David, before we wrap up.
Yeah.
Around future outlook, where do you see prop tech heading in the next 5 to 10 years, and what innovations do you anticipate in that time?
That's an easy question. Uh, well, I mean, we've been talking about this, but I think a lot of the things that have been out for 5 years, the real estate companies are starting to invest in now. I think, and going forward, I think you'll obviously see a lot more widespread building management system usage, taking advantage of building efficiencies. I think you'll see a lot more applications that reduce headcount or resources around customer service. We've gone ChatGPT or OpenAI or any of the large language models have enabled kind of the chatbot 2.0, where you're on somebody's a if you're on a retailer's website and you had to ask a question, or even a real estate company's, unless you put that answer or the question in perfectly, you're probably going to get a pretty bad result. Now you have the ability to actually have a much more engaging dialogue, AI based dialogue. The only caveat to that is you have to make sure you give that bot access to actual information. Like, if you still only give it access to a few pieces, it's still going to spit out a bad result. I think the area of site selection gets a lot more interesting in terms of understanding retail sales combined with, like, a location in a city, combined with demographics and neighborhoods, combined with weather. I mean, all these different, because the models can now crunch things so much more efficiently, or I say the processing power of the computers that we have, and the AI layer can go through a lot more data a lot more quickly. I think you're going to see some pretty interesting ways in which you can compile different data sets into one. and make some of these things, like site selection and investments, more, more predictable, if you will. And then I guess lastly too, I think, and this is future stuff, and it's not specific to the real estate industry, but if you've been following the news recently, I think quantum computing is starting to take off, and I barely want to talk about it because I don't want to scare real estate owners because they're still really scared about AI for the most part. But quantum is just a is without kind of getting too nerdy about it, it's going to exponentially increase our computing power. And that is done in a way that will all these things we just talked about, like whether it's site selection or other things, but it's going to completely revolutionize cryptography as well and security. So everybody better get their AI game on in the next 5 years, or maybe 10 years, because once we kind of get to that kind of steady state, this whole next wave of computing is coming for the good and for the bad, and so it's that much more important to get going now.
I love it. David, I want to thank you so much for joining me here today. Look forward to future conversations, but really appreciate your insights.
Yeah, thanks, sir. I appreciate you having me.